The first tank blew. Shrapnel rang across the frozen parking lot, and the orange glow inside the convenience store flickered like something alive. Engine 4 rolled in hard, tires grinding over ice, wipers beating back sleet that stung the windshield. Captain Harris stepped off before the rig even settled, his boots punching into slush. The air tasted metallic, that mix of propane, burning plastic, and winter. A second tank on the exchange rack hissed, venting loud enough to vibrate in his ribs. Command, Engine 4 on scene. Heavy fire, active explosions, civilian report of a child inside. Harris radioed, voice steady but clipped. He scanned the storefront. Tempered glass had already spider-webbed, black smoke pumping out from the seams like the building was exhaling. A sedan skidded toward them and stopped crooked. A man stumbled out, face gray with shock. "My daughter, she ran inside to use the bathroom. She's still in there." His breath clouded in the freezing air as another pop sounded behind him. Harris held up a hand. "Stay back. We're going in." It wasn't reassurance. It was procedure. And the man seemed to know it, collapsing against a concrete post as paramedics moved in. A third tank erupted, this one throwing a sharp flash that momentarily lit the entire lot. Firefighter Ortiz flinched but kept moving, hauling the irons. "Those are gonna keep going," he muttered. "Then we move faster," Harris answered. They masked up. The cold made every strap stiff. SCBA alarms chirped their normal pre-check tones. A gust pushed smoke sideways, giving a momentary glimpse of the interior. Aisle shelves melting, ceiling tiles dropping like wet cardboard. Somewhere inside, something fell with a dull thud. They made the push. Harris swung the Halligan into the weakened glass. It collapsed inwards with a burst of heat that slapped them in the face. He stepped through, low and fast, nozzle man right on him. The store felt like a furnace. Smoke banked down to knee height. Sprinklers had activated but were barely dribbling, steam rising off every surface. "Engine 4 interior," he radioed. "Beginning primary search. Zero visibility. Advise if more tanks start venting on the B side." The radio crackled back with wind noise and a half-cut acknowledgement. A micro moment of memory hit him. The sound of a propane tank exploding on a trailer fire 20 years ago. The concussion he'd felt through his chest. He pushed the thought down and kept moving. "Cap, right side's collapsing," Ortiz warned. A shelving unit had folded inward, sending snack bags drifting across the floor like burned leaves. Over the hiss and crackle, Harris heard something else faint. A muffled sob, or just the building settling. He froze for half a second. His gloved hand pressed to the side of his helmet, listening. There, again. A small sound, left side, toward the bathrooms. "Got a possible voice," he said, pushing deeper. They advanced, sweeping with the nozzle, controlling the rollover licking overhead. The heat was building fast, too fast. When the ceiling insulation ignited above the coffee counter, flames crawled laterally like they were searching too. A loud boom shook the structure. Dust rained down. The lights went out entirely. "That's another tank," Ortiz said, voice tight now. Harris steadied himself against a counter. "Keep moving, kids close." He wasn't sure of that. But the sound had been real. They reached the hallway to the bathrooms, but the doorway was half blocked. A piece of the drop ceiling had pancaked, metal framing twisted. Then he heard it clearly. A small cry, weak, close. He shoved the debris aside, clearing a gap. Smoke pushed through the opening like a living thing escaping confinement. Before he could enter, his radio lit up sharply. "Engine 4, be advised, and another row of cylinders on the Charlie side is heating up. Expect additional explosions." Harris felt the floor under his knee vibrate. And then the child cried out again, louder this time. Debris rattled overhead. The floor trembled under Harris's boots, and the child's cry cut through the smoke like a beacon he couldn't afford to lose. He dropped lower, sweeping his hand across the floor to find the hallway threshold. Heat rolled out in waves from deeper inside the store, pulsing with each distant explosion outside. Ortiz pulled up beside him, visor streaked with soot. "Cap, we gotta watch the clock. Those tanks cook off again. We're in the collapse zone." "I know," Harris said, forcing calm into his voice. "We get the kid fast." He pushed into the narrow corridor. Visibility was down to inches, just shifting smoke and the red pulse of flame reflecting off wet tile. A sprinkler head dripped beside him, sputtering more steam than water. Behind them, the low-air chirp of a distant crew's SCBA echoed faintly, carried on the turbulence inside the structure. A quiet moment slipped in. Harris felt the familiar weight of the mask pressing against his face, the rhythm of his own breathing filling his ears. He thought of his own kid, now grown, and the nights he'd promised he'd always make it home. He pushed the thought aside as soon as it formed, tightening his grip on the Halligan. Another sound surfaced. A cough. Small, weak. Bathroom door, left side. "Ortiz, this one," Harris said. They forced the door, the latch already melted. The room inside was hotter than expected. Smoke swirled in a tight column, pulling upward through a vent that was failing. There, crouched behind a trash can, was a girl, maybe 7 or 8, eyes wide behind a mess of dark hair. She hugged her knees, trembling. Harris dropped to her level. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, voice low and even. "We've got you. We're taking you out." She nodded once, quick and fearful. When he reached for her, her hand latched onto his glove with surprising strength. A sharp crack sounded above them. Ortiz jerked his head up. "Ceiling's going." "Move," Harris said. Ortiz wrapped the girl in his turnout coat as Harris cleared the doorway. They entered the hallway just as a section of ceiling collapsed behind them, sending sparks scattering across the floor like angry fireflies. The temperature spiked. Rollover deepened along the corridor ceiling, curling overhead. "Engine 4 interior, victim located, beginning extrication," Harris radioed. Static answered back, followed by half a message. "Tanks venting. Exterior crews pulling back." Too distorted to get the full picture, but enough to know the outside conditions were worsening. They advanced toward the front of the store, but the fire had shifted. Something structural had failed to their right, and now flame was pushing horizontally across the aisles, driven by wind from a blown-out window. It created a long, roaring tunnel of heat between them and their exit. Ortiz hesitated. "Cap, that's not survivable." Harris scanned left. A service corridor, narrow, partly collapsed, but less fire. Maybe passable. "We take the side path," Harris decided. "Stay low, keep her tight." They crawled into the corridor, heat beating down through the thin drywall. Something popped behind them. A pressurized can, maybe. The girl buried her face against Ortiz's chest, her small body rising and falling in panicked breaths. Halfway through, Harris stopped. Another vibration, stronger, more sustained. Then Command's voice shot through, clearer this time. "All units, be advised. Second row of propane tanks is now actively venting. Expect imminent detonation. Repeat, imminent detonation." Ortiz looked at him through the mask. No words, just the shared understanding that their margin had vanished. The girl whispered, barely audible over the roar, "Please don't leave me." "We're not," Harris said. "We're getting you out." And then the far wall shook hard enough to throw dust into his facepiece. The next explosion hit like a freight train. Dust blasted through the corridor, and somewhere deeper in the store, metal screamed as something tore loose. Harris braced himself against the wall, feeling the vibration run straight through his arm. Heat pushed in from the direction of the sales floor. Hotter, faster, a sign the fire had just found new fuel. Ortiz tightened his grip on the girl, shielding her with his body as ceiling particles rained onto their helmets. "Cap, we gotta move now," Ortiz said, voice tight but steady. "I know. Keep her close. Follow me." Harris led them forward, inching along the service corridor that paralleled the main store. The drywall to their right was bowing inward from heat. A faint glow showed through the cracks. If it breached, flame would sweep through like a blowtorch. They passed a utility door. Harris tried the handle, stuck, warped by the heat. He forced the Halligan into the jam, giving it one hard pry. The frame snapped and the door fell inward, revealing a small storage alcove. Cooler air brushed against his turnout coat. "Take a breath," he said. Not a break, just 2 seconds of reset. The girl made a small, choking sound, trying to breathe through Ortiz's bunker coat. Harris placed a gloved hand on her shoulder. "You're doing good. We're almost out." A faint memory hit him, carrying a boy out of a trailer fire 15 years back. The boy had clung to him the same way. That one made it out. One didn't. Harris shut the thought down before it could fully form. A sharp pop snapped him back. The wall to their right bulged again, flames flickering through seams. "No more delays," Harris muttered. "Let's finish this." They pushed out of the alcove and continued toward the back door, a steel exit that opened to the Charlie side of the building. But as they closed in, Harris saw something that made his stomach drop. The exit handle glowed orange. Heat bleed through. The exterior was fully involved. "Back door's compromised," he said. "We can't take it." Ortiz didn't argue. "Then where?" "Left turn ahead should lead to the delivery bay. Might give us a shot along the Delta side." The store shook again, smaller than the last blast but close. The girl whimpered, gripping Ortiz's coat tighter. They turned into the delivery corridor. Smoke here was thinner, pulled by drafts to an opening farther down. Promising and but also dangerous. Fire travels the same way air does. About halfway through, Harris stopped abruptly. There was a new sound, low, rhythmic, mechanical. "Cap?" Ortiz asked. Harris listened. The rumble grew sharper, closer. "Collapse," he said. "Something's failing overhead." They surged forward just as a section of roof deck dropped behind them, blocking the path they'd just come through. Metal shelving clanged as it hit the floor, sparks scattering. "Keep moving!" Harris shouted. They reached the end of the hallway. A rolling steel service door stood partially open, maybe 2 feet of clearance. Smoke sucked through the gap like a vacuum. Harris dropped flat and peered out. The service bay beyond was messy with debris, but the fire was lighter here. And on the far end, the exterior wall was still intact. "This is our route," Harris decided. "We belly through." Ortiz slid the girl forward first. She whimpered as the concrete scraped her knees, but she kept moving. Harris followed, gear grinding against the floor. For a moment, the steel door caught on his SCBA bottle. He exhaled sharply, twisted, and cleared it. Inside the service bay, temperature dropped enough for his skin to feel the difference through gear. Not good, just less deadly. Then a new radio transmission sliced into his ear. "All crews, command. We have active flame impingement on the second propane rack. Expect full detonation within 30 seconds. Ortiz froze for half a beat. "Cap?" "I heard it," Harris said. "We move faster." He scanned the bay for an exit. There, a side door leading out to the Delta side. Harris pushed toward it, the girl held tight in Ortiz's arms. 10 feet out, something shifted above them. A groan. Deep. Structural. Harris looked up instinctively. The ceiling beam above them bowed, then cracked. The beam split with a sharp report. Dust spilled in a quick, choking curtain, and the entire bay seemed to hold its breath for one impossible second. "Move!" Harris barked. Ortiz clutched the girl and sprint crawled beneath the failing beam. Harris followed, one hand on the nozzle, the other bracing the Halligan like a crutch. The beam slammed down a half-second later, striking the concrete right where they'd been. The impact rattled through the bay, shaking tools from pegboards and knocking over a stack of crates. They didn't stop. Heat pushed in behind them, a rising wall fed by flames finding new pathways through the structure. Harris heard something outside too, that telltale rising hiss of tanks venting under extreme heat. It was louder now, closer, the kind of sound you don't forget after enough years on the job. "Doors ahead," Ortiz shouted. The exit on the Delta side was partially warped but still standing. Harris grabbed the push bar, leaned in with all his weight. Metal groaned, stuck, then broke free. Freezing air blasted in, sharp, icy, clean compared to the interior smoke. They spilled outside into a narrow alley choked with drifting steam and ambient glow from the fire. The sky above flickered orange. Snowflakes hissed as they landed on the hot pavement. For a moment, a single grounding breath, Harris put a hand on the girl's back. She was shaking hard, but alive. He watched her small hand clutch the fabric of Ortiz's coat, knuckles white. just a kid who'd walked into a bathroom at the wrong time. A shout cut through the alley. "Engine 4, this way, move it!" Two firefighters waved from behind a dumpster that served as a temporary shield. Beyond them, the propane racks on the Charlie side burned like a row of torches. One tank already lay split open, venting a jet of flame sideways. Harris and Ortiz ran, staying low, bodies angled to shield the girl from debris. Snow mixed with ash, coating their helmets. Another tank ruptured, sending a concussive blast across the lot. The shockwave rippled the puddles of melted snow around their boots. "Down!" Harris yelled. They crouched behind the dumpster just as a shard of metal clattered off it and skidded into the alley. The girl flinched, burying her face into Ortiz's chest again. Command's voice came over the radio, strained but controlled. "All units, defensive operations only. Propane rack 2 just failed. Establish collapse perimeter." Harris breathed hard, mask fogging slightly. They were out. Not safe, but out. That mattered. A medic crew rushed in. One knelt beside the girl, guiding her gently away from Ortiz. She resisted at first, but Harris gave her a small nod, the kind meant to anchor someone who'd gone through too much too fast. She loosened her grip. "You did good," he told her. "Real good." Her eyes brimmed, not with an outburst, just that quiet shock kids get when the adrenaline dips but the world hasn't settled yet. She whispered, "Thank you," barely audible over the ongoing chaos. Another explosion boomed across the lot, lighting their faces. Everyone instinctively ducked. Snow fluttered around them like ash from a dying star. Harris steadied himself against the dumpster. The adrenaline crashed in waves. He exhaled slowly, letting the cold bite through his turnout coat. Ortiz pressed a hand to his helmet, adjusting his mask, trying to slow his own breathing. "You good?" Harris asked him. "Think so," Ortiz said. "Air's low, but yeah." The girl glanced back at the burning structure, then at the two firefighters. "My dad. Is he?" "He's with medics," Harris answered. "You'll see him in a minute." And for the first time since they'd entered the building, something loosened in his chest. Nothing triumphant, nothing heroic, just relief. Plain and quiet. Behind them, the convenience store roof finally caved, sending a column of flame into the snow-filled night. Crews shouted, repositioning hoses, establishing distance. The fight wasn't over for them, but the child was out. Harris removed his helmet, letting the cold air hit his sweat-soaked hair. He stood in the alley, watching breath fog in front of him, listening to the distant roar of a fire that had taken everything except the one life he'd gone in for. A paramedic touched his arm lightly. "We'll take her from here, Captain." He nodded, stepping back, watching the girl walk toward the medic unit. Small steps, blanket around her shoulders, her silhouette flickering in the orange light. Another explosion rolled across the lot. He didn't flinch this time. Some nights end loud, some end simply because the people who needed saving made it out. Tonight was one of those.